We are just hours away from finding out who is going to land the prize of the 2024 NHL Draft, Macklin Celebrini. The quest of backing into Macklin and Houdini for Celebrini is coming to a close, but which team actually deserves to land this coveted first overall pick, one of the most talented players that we have seen enter the draft in quite some time? Well, I've gone through all 16 teams that could potentially end up with the opportunity to draft Celebrini and putting them onto this tier list to explain which teams are most deserving of landing Celebrini, which ones would be best for the league, and which ones would be an absolute travesty. And we'll start with the team that has the best chance to land Celebrini, the San Jose Sharks. To me, that would be best case scenario for the league if he ends up going to San Jose. The Sharks have a great fan base. They've been down on their luck. They were a dynasty that could never quite win the cup. They've gone through the rebuild now, and if they get rewarded with Celebrini, we could see a new age of San Jose Sharks dominance. Plus, a lot of the top-end talent is kind of concentrated a little bit towards the east. I know Chicago is technically in the west, but Bedard is closer to the eastern time zones. We really only have McDavid for fans out west, and if we add Celebrini out there, that could intensify the balance of star power. Plus, Sharks fans would be happy for the first time in about 5 years. The team with the next best odds is the team that won the lottery last year and got Connor Bedard, the Chicago Blackhawks, and no surprise I'm putting them at the bottom of this tier list. I say it would be unfair if the Blackhawks got Celebrini 1 year after they landed Connor Bedard. We have seen in the past teams land top 2, top 3 picks in back-to-back years, but back-to-back number 1 picks, that is straight up like Oilers in the mid-2000s levels of bullshit luck. If we're gonna get another Blackhawks dynasty, please God, just not like this. After that, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and I think they would be a great landing spot for Celebrini as well. I put them in the good for them tier, not quite great for the league. I do think that the Ducks are a solid franchise with a great fan base. They got screwed out of getting Sidney Crosby back when that farce of the lottery happened, which is why it wouldn't surprise me if the league once again screws them out of a number 1 overall pick and a generational type player. The Columbus Blue Jackets unfortunately get knocked down a little bit just because they have been so mismanaged for the past 10 years. Kekalainen is gone, obviously, but this is also the team that hired and fired Mike Babcock in the span of a few months. Do we really want Macklin Celebrini wasting away in Columbus for 7 years before he eventually goes to a real team? I don't think so. I don't think they need Macklin Celebrini, but I wouldn't hate it if that's where he ended up. Next up, the Montreal Canadiens, and as much as I hate to admit it, Macklin Celebrini in Montreal would be a slam dunk home run for the NHL, one of the most popular teams, landing a top prospect and one who's actually potentially going to live up to the generational type billing that a number 1 prospect should have. Celebrini makes the Montreal Canadiens a perennial contender, makes the Atlantic Division a heck of a lot more interesting, and would allow Montreal to have a really good young core of forwards to build around. Next up, it's the Utah, whatever they're going to be called. The Coyote logo still goes on there, but I'm putting them on the come on them tier because it's just going to be painful if the Coyotes get ripped away from Arizona because of shitty management and ownership, and then immediately at their new home get a number 1 overall pick. Nothing against y'all in Utah. I hope hockey thrives there, but just out of respect for the Coyotes fans, this would just be another kick in the balls if they actually get the number 1 pick right after leaving. After them is the Ottawa Senators, and I could see this being something that is really great for the league or something that's really good for them, but let's be honest, the Senators have a lot of really good talent between Stützle, Tkachuk, Chychrun, Jake Sanderson. They've got a good young core already, and that would be a good place for Macklin Celebrini to end up, but I just think that there are some teams that could use it a little bit more. I wouldn't hate it, it would be fine, and I think it would make Ottawa interesting for the first time in a long time, but they're not one of my top picks for where Celebrini could end up. Now, on the other hand, the Seattle Kraken would be a very interesting team if they got Celebrini. Still an expansion team, one that has made the playoffs and actually won a round. They don't really have a defining characteristics. They're sort of rebuilding with firing Dave Haxtell. They've got some young players like Wright. Adding Celebrini could really put hockey on the map in Seattle, so I think it would be a good landing spot. Not a great one, but a good one. Now, the Calgary Flames, on the other hand, I'm not too hot on them ending up with Celebrini just because I really don't know if they have a plan. Like, are they rebuilding? Are they just retooling? What is this organization going to look like in 3 years? I honestly don't have a clue. They have some good young prospects and some good young players, but they also just sold heavily at the deadline. They definitely want to get rid of Huberdeau if they can. It's just a weird situation, so I'm not too keen on him going to Calgary, even though it's not the worst situation in the world for him to end up. The New Jersey Devils is kind of like the Chicago Blackhawks. Like, this team is just so loaded. They have Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier. This would just be giving, like, Megatron the nuclear codes. It would be an abject disaster if New Jersey ended up with it. But I keep them out of the very bottom tier just because I am a Devils fan, and this would be quite funny. But objectively, it's just terrible for the league. Next up is the Buffalo Sabres, a team that I think has squandered a lot of good young talent and just can't seem to get out of their own way. They've hired Lindy Ruff as their head coach. I do think that they have a good young core and are going in the right direction, so Celebrini would probably be the piece that pushes them over the top, but they've already gotten so many swings at this, I don't know if I want to trust them with another one. Philadelphia Flyers are up next, and as much as it pains me to say this as a fan of a rival team, it would be great for the NHL if the Philadelphia Flyers landed Macklin Celebrini. This team almost made the playoffs with basically nobody on their roster. They're young, they're upcoming, they're very hungry. Macklin Celebrini would make them an instant contender in the East, even if Michkov didn't come over for another 2 years, which it sounds like he could be coming over next year. The Flyers would become the new powerhouse of the Metro Division, and I'm sure the NHL would love that. And the Wild, I think that would be another fantastic landing spot for Celebrini. Yeah, they have Kaprizov, but they don't really have a standout stellar player that everybody around the league fears. Celebrini could be that guy, and he could elevate Kaprizov as well. Minnesota has consistently been that mid-team. Celebrini would take them out of that conversation instantly, which is where the state of hockey deserves to be. And then we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. No. Just no. Do not do it, NHL. Do not fucking do it. It cannot be allowed to happen, and if it does, I will scream collusion at the top of my lungs for the next 10 years. Then we have the Detroit Red Wings with a 0.5% chance, and you know what? It might be good for the Red Wings and the Yzer plan, but all my sympathy for the Red Wings went out the window when they kept bitching and complaining about not making the playoffs this year. If there's any sort of karmic justice, that bitching will not be rewarded with Macklin Celebrini. And then last but not least, also with a 0.5% chance to get Macklin Celebrini, the St. Louis Blues. I would like to see this. Yeah, they've won a Stanley Cup and they're a team in transition. They kind of erroneously fired Craig Berube, but they're a good squad, a popular squad. They've got a good mix of young players and still some veterans, even though Jordan Bennington is, the worst. Celebrini going to the Blues would not be the worst thing in the world, and I would feel okay if he ended up there.